Thank you, and hello to our audience today. You're attending the webinar presented and sponsored by NOAA with content from Forrester on service level agreements, understanding and closing the gaps between information technology and users, how do service level agreements work, and what new technology can perhaps improve service level agreement performance. Today we have two guest presenters. One from NOAA Software is Ilya Epstein, who will provide a technology demo. Ilya is our Director of Solutions Engineering on a global basis, and he owns responsibility for all pre-sales customer interaction globally in support of our SAP, Siebel, PeopleSoft, and Salesforce products. Today, as our guest speaker, we have Jean-Pierre Garbani, Vice President, Principal Analyst serving infrastructure and operations for Forrester Research. JP serves infrastructure and operations in predicting and quantifying IT disruption, and his expertise is very broad, covering IT management software, operations, and related issues. JP regularly publishes research covering these issues and providing introspection into shifting industry dynamics, the economic pressures, and the impacts of new technology such as virtualization. I think we all know that JP has several decades of experience in IT and almost every facet of operations and deployment, and he has written extensively on solutions both for industrial, commercial applications in many areas. He's published many different documents for the Forrester team and in many other areas, and is a coveted and valued speaker for us today. We are delighted and pleased to have both of these gentlemen present today, and we'll shortly turn the meeting over to JP. A little bit of housekeeping. If you have questions, because the registration today was quite large, close to 400 people have registered for this event, please send these questions to sales@noaa.com, and we will forward them as appropriate. Once again, sales@noaa.com, and we'll forward them as appropriate. So at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to JP and welcome him to the session. JP?
Thank you, Michael, and welcome and good day to everyone. My name is JP Garbani. Actually, it's Jean-Pierre, but since 1972, I was christened JP in my first trip to the United States, and since then it has stayed that way. What we're going to talk about today is service level agreement and service level management to a certain extent. So we'll see at first a short presentation and then a demonstration of the technology we are talking about with Ilya. So what are we going to explore? We believe that service level agreement and service level management, although it has been around for more than a decade, for a long time. We have been talking about SLAs and SLM and all that kind of thing for as long as I've been an analyst, and it's been 13 years now. This thing didn't really, and that's my feeling, and it's certainly shared by a number of people, both in operations and on the vendor side, that it never came into a reality that we somehow created service level management and service level agreements from what we could measure and not really from what it should represent for the end user. And there is a gap there. There's a gap between what we as IT professionals are able to provide with the tools that we have and what the user can interpret and understand about the underlying technology. So we're going to explore that. We're going to see what is a good service level agreement, or what should be in it, how it must serve both the end user, the business user, and the IT professional, and try to shrink that gap in expectation between what we can provide and what the user want to see. One of the technologies we're also, of course, going to talk about as a way to measure service level agreements is end user experience management and the different aspects that we find end user experience management on the market today. So, what is service level management globally? Well, it's two parts, okay? There is a service level agreement, which we can see as a contract between business and IT, but which we can see also beyond this narrow definition as a contract between the business and the service provider. And this becomes very significant in an age where we're talking about, software as a service. We're talking about putting applications in the cloud. We're going to have, hosting providers where we are going to relocate part of the infrastructure and parts of the services and applications. So the service level agreement today is certainly more important than it was when, it was simply the contract between IT and the business. It's now the only way we have to actually dialogue about the service that we are buying with the service provider. Service level management is the process of reporting the result of service level agreements, of what we have measured against these service level agreements. It has, as I mentioned, two global uses. One is to effectively show to the business that we are doing our best, we are conforming to the contract, we are providing the service as defined by the service level agreement. Two, in the IT realm itself, it is also something that we can use to identify our weaknesses, and we will just, brush that subject at the end of the presentation. One question that I get very often is, what is it that we put in a service level agreement? What are the things that we should, convey to the end user or to the business as representative of the service that we are providing? And, I've put that list of not metrics themselves, but what the metrics should be. It should be objectively measurable. In other words, it's not a question of impression. If the end user says, well, I find that, the response time is slow, then the service level agreement measurement of response time should be the answer to make sure that we understand, what slow means, or whether IT is in fact doing the right thing, and that it's the end user perception of the response time that is not, I would say, satisfactory. We should include a statement of expected results. So, if we say, well, here is the response time that we want, here is also the target for this response time. And that's a question that I get very often when people ask me, what is a good response time? What is the norm? What is the benchmark? What are the things that we should consider? And actually, there is not a single answer to that question. You've got, people in e-commerce saying, 3 seconds is what the target we're aiming for. I've looked at certain statistics the other day, and you can get 3 seconds in North America and 60 seconds in China from the same website. So it's, you've got to consider a certain number of geographies first. The second is that response time is, as I just mentioned, subjective. The good response time is something that doesn't slow you down. The IT service is a tool, and center, for example, in an insurance company or in a bank or, any kind of service, you want the response time to be as fast as possible. You want sub-second response time because, the client is on the other end of the telephone and they would not understand why you are taking so long to get their information, their contract, their, balance sheet or whatever it is that they are asking for. So that's really, the criteria for response time. What is the service and how the service should work in sync with the end user. We should focus on the effectiveness or efficiency of the service because that's really what it is all about. It's a tool. We should, and we'll come back to that later on, have a meaningful trend and statistical analysis. Why is that? Well, all the quality studies, whether it's in manufacturing or anywhere else, and you certainly remember that years ago we were all talking about Six Sigma, whether you're going to look at CMMI, Six Sigma, or other things, statistical analysis of results is very important in terms of identifying weaknesses in your process or your infrastructure or your application. We should use standards and benchmark. Well, yes, and again, the benchmark should be based on reality. If you want to use a benchmark like 3 seconds for e-commerce, you've got to look also at the reality of what your e-commerce site is doing. It should be challenging but attainable, of course. Okay? If I say, well, I want sub-second response time at this site, and quite obviously the infrastructure doesn't have the capacity to manage so many users, then it's meaningless. And of course, it's a contract between the people responsible for the delivery of the service and the people receiving the service. So this said, how can we structure a service level agreement? Well, I've put together something that is, and that will probably surprise a number of people in the audience, at least the youngest one. There is a standard on data communication system and services, and it has been revised in 1992. Originally, it dates back from 1982, I think. But very early on, when we were building all these new systems based on mainframes and exchange between terminals and applications, etc., we already thought about the user interface and the user value that should be received at the service level. And we defined this set of 8 parameters. Mostly, 3 types of metrics. One is speed. You can translate that into response time. One is accuracy. One is availability. And we look at these in different situations of, access, login, transfer, and logout. And of course, everybody look at speed, and we just talked about it, as being very understandable, response time. Okay. I log into the system or to the website. I want, access. Good. I'm exchanging data. I'm, doing any kind of operation. I want the shortest possible response time, again, in sync with what I'm doing. Logout, same thing. Availability is also very intuitive. It's there, it's not there. What is important here is that we are looking at availability and response time as the global interface of the service. We're not looking at, components. Now, one thing that puzzles many people is accuracy. What does that mean? I'm going to give you an example. I'm currently writing a paper. That's my job at Forrester, or part of my job at Forrester. And this morning, one of the things that I do when I write a paper is that I look at what my colleagues are writing on the same subject. Okay, it may not be exactly the same subject of IT operation, but one is writing on development, and I want to understand the risk that applications have today in the new cloud environment, for example. And I want to look at maybe storage, etc. So I want to do some research on the Forrester website. And this morning, well, I connect to the Forrester website, and I cannot access anything because I'm treated as a client, and they are asking me a key that, of course, I don't have. So I called the help desk and discovered that yesterday they changed some of the characteristics of the website, and that my name shifted from being an employee to being a client, and since I don't have the right credentials, I cannot access anything. So that's really what we mean by accuracy, okay? Incorrect access. I try to access it, I'm not recognized, that's an error, that's a problem, and that's measurable, and that should be part of the SLA. By the same token, the database that you are accessing through the service may not contain the right information. It happens, very often that a bank, for example, will maintain several different databases depending on the type of service that they are providing. So your checking account may have a certain address, and your savings account may have the same address, but in case of a bouncing check, for example, there may be an address that has not been updated since, Methuselah was a young boy, and therefore, it will go, if one of the checks that you've put on your account is bouncing, it will be sent to that address. Tough luck. Okay, so that's what we mean by all these things. Now, in terms of the service level management itself, we have three things in it. We have, of course, the definition, management of the contract itself, management of all the SLA. You have the monitoring and, the connection and statistical analysis of all the data that we're collecting about the service. And then, the use of that data, one part of it, again, is business-oriented, one part is internal IT-oriented, so it goes to continuous service improvement. So, now, once we have put, we have set the stage for what is an SLA, what is SLM, all that kind of thing, and it's very well and good, but the reality is very different sometimes. We may have an SLA that is expressed in end user terms, of course, okay, which characterizes a certain number of things that the end user could, and should receive in terms of service. But we have also the IT capabilities, on the other hand, of collecting the data that will prove or that will support this type of thing. What I've seen very often is that we are actually putting the SLA together based on, very often on availability only, and very often on availability of components only, not as an end-to-end service. So we are looking at, things like, we are using, or, that much CPU. We are, the servers were available 99.999% of the time, et cetera, et cetera. So we are reporting, things that are typically IT, with somehow the expectation that the end user will accept that as the proof that the service was good. Well, actually, we see IT, we see components, the end user sees applications and services, and we need to bridge the gap. We need to find a way, an end-to-end way of doing that measurement. So what we have very often is this, okay? We have a monitoring solution. We have data collection that collects data everywhere, whether it's, our network, our firewall for security, the load balancers, web servers, etc. And it brings data into a server that does the analysis, and it reports, to our operation center, etc. And we want that to be, to do double duty, because when we put that together, we put it together in order to resolve problems, do capacity planning, etc., manage the infrastructure. We didn't put it together to manage the end user experience. And that's really where the disconnect starts. So we need to add to this something that will represent the end user end-to-end experience. So we report the wrong metrics, as I said, we report the uptime at the component level, okay? The network bandwidth, the internal server metrics, which is, blows my mind because it's really not that important anyway. But we are not capable very often to report the true user experience as it is seen by the end user sitting at their workstation. Why is it important at the workstation? Because some of the applications that we're using are, of course, heavy on the client side, or they are, using a browser, and whatever happens in there, okay, escapes totally the monitoring that we have put in place. I'm sure that every one of you has experienced, getting to a web page and waiting for an ad to appear. And that's really frustrating because your machine is totally blocked, which, says something about the guy who wrote the software. But it's waiting, and it's waiting, and it's waiting, and nothing happens. You can try to call, to close it. You can try to do Control Alternate Delete to stop it. Nothing works. And that's really what we want to also measure, because end user experience is at that level. So how can we use or define the product and the technology that could help us, do this measurement of end user experience? Well, there are several solutions on the market, and you're certainly all aware of them. The first one is network appliance. So a network appliance is a box that you connect to your spam port on the switch, and it passively, collects everything that goes on the wire. It's really a packet snatcher. It copies the packets, and then it analyzes, combine all these things into transactions and look at the round trip between the message that came in and the answer from the application. Well, this is measuring SLA at the data center level. So it's very good for the data center. For the people in IT like me, it's very interesting because I know exactly what my infrastructure is doing. I have the round trips through all that. Very good. I have no idea of what's happening at the end user level. And I cannot know it because I don't reach there. Okay. The second thing is that I cannot measure availability because if there is no traffic and nobody, working on that specific application, I'm not recording anything. So we say, well, we should have that, but we should also have a script robot, something that either as a service or as a station somewhere in our infrastructure, something that emulates an end user, that pings an application at regular intervals from a script. And that's really, providing a lot of information about availability and about performance. But because of the nature of it, because it's a kind of a parasite that you're putting on your network, you cannot do it every seconds, every 2 seconds, every 3 seconds. So you're going to do it, let's say, every 5 minutes, which is okay in terms of availability, probably. But in terms of performance, it's absolutely not representative because, you know, we're talking about millions of operations per second compared to a 5 minutes, 5 seconds interval. A lot of things can happen during that interval. So you're between a rock and a hard place. If you want it to be more significant, you're increasing the frequency and you're creating a lot of, you know, parasitic traffic on your network and, of course, your application. If you want to reduce that, then you are increasing the interval and what you get is not really representative. What we have seen in the past few months is, or year, is JavaScript injection. That is automatically introducing on a web page a script that will, and a tag, that will get to the end user desktop and measure a certain number of things. There is even an API, a standard API in the browser to collect that information. So the latest browser will come equipped with a way to collect data at the end user level. But of course, it has to be an e-commerce or an HTTP-based type of application. If you are trying to do 3270 telnet, forget about it, it's not working. So it does not cover, it's certainly interesting, it's certainly limited, you cannot write extensive scripts and the browser interface is not giving you a lot of things, but just the essential. The problem is that it doesn't cover the spectrum of application that we find in enterprise. It may cover what we call the systems of engagement, that is what is close to the end user, your typical apps, and, you know, e-commerce and stuff like that. System of record, that is all those things that are, you know, processed in the background, or sometimes on mainframe, etc. There is no access to that. So what we're thinking about is the best solution is certainly to put an agent on the end user device, on the workstation, because now you're going through that technology to see exactly what the end user sees. You're going to see transitions from, you know, message sent, message received, how long does it take to, you know, paint the screen, etc. So it provides also the global spectrum, because from there I'm going to see exactly what the end user receives, whether the application is not available, whether, you know, it's speedy enough, and whether it's accurate enough. So that's, you know, very good to, you know, the goal we want to achieve. It also covers anything that runs on your PC is going to be covered. Okay. It also provides more information than simply the SLA. It provides also information in terms of, you know, what is the usability of that application? Are users spending time, you know, keying in, calling the wrong page or doing the wrong part of the application? So good feedback to the developers. So that's really, you know, what reduces the gap between end users and IT. It really gives a lot of information about end user perception, and from that we can certainly derive what should, you know, be the right SLA. In terms of reporting, once we have, you know, selected the right technology to do the capture, we have two major components. So we are reporting that to the end user, the results that we have collected. We are going to, you know, put that and use statistics and, you know, provide them with kind of a cloud of, you know, the response times that we have collected. We're going also to use that for alerting on incident and problem management, because, you know, if there are spikes in the response time, that denotes that the problem is somewhere in our infrastructure or on the workstation itself. And we're going to also report to IT management on the continuous improvement. And actually, using this type of example of, the CMMI statistical analysis or Six Sigma analysis, we're going to look at two things. We're going to look at whether we are conforming to the SLA, that is, where the average measurement that we're taking are on target with the SLA. But we're going also to measure the standard deviation and how much dispersion we have from the target. And the less dispersion we have, the better we are in terms of process, because consistency is very important. So if we have good results and consistently good results, then we can report that effectively all the processes that are coming to building and delivering that service are actually working properly. So the conclusion, if you want to implement a successful service level management process, you should monitor the SLA parameters, of course. Okay. You need to reconcile what the end user experience is, because that's the essence of the SLA, with the type of measurement that you are making. You can also use that in, through statistical analysis to actually improve your service delivery. And you can certainly control the cost. Instead of fighting fires, you can certainly bring the whole thing into a much more controlled environment that will pay off at the end. So my recommendation is that, use the MD standard as a basis. You may add a lot of things in it, okay, because they are, of course, service level agreements may be much more complicated if you're talking to a hosting provider, for example, in terms of data, in terms of security, in terms of many things more than simply the performance of service delivery. But for SaaS, for cloud applications, for a number of things, this is a good starting base, a good starting point. Okay, you should consider tools that are appropriate. That is, if service level management and service level agreements are in your future, use the right tool to measure them. And not only implement the service level management process, but think about continuous improvement, statistical analysis, and all those things you can get from managing service level agreements. With that, I thank you very much for listening, and I will pass the floor to Michael. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jean-Pierre. That was excellent. I'm going to pass control now to Ilya Epstein.
So the first thing we're going to take a look at is the response metric from the Knoa perspective, right? Now, one thing you'll note right away out of the box is that we're able to monitor all enterprise applications. For example, here in this data set, we're monitoring Salesforce, which is a SaaS delivery. We're monitoring SIBO application, PeopleSoft. We're also able to monitor thick client applications like SAP, ERP systems, which are not subject, for example, to Java-based injection at all. So this is when JP talked about the fact that a Knoa agent technology or agent technology is able to capture across all of your enterprise applications. That is indeed the case, and we could do this across all types of application models. Now, another interesting point is, what do we mean by response time? So JP talked about the fact that there's a lot of solutions that provide component level monitoring. And I want to illustrate this with a simple example. Let's say I click on this operation button, right? So there's a lot of things that happen there. There was a server activity, there was a database activity, there was a client activity to actually render this graph and image. So a component-based type of monitoring, whether you're doing it through an APM tool, whether you're doing it through a server monitoring, would not give you this true end-to-end picture of what the end users are actually experiencing. With a Knoa solution, it's different. We're actually capturing for each operation, and you can see here examples, in each screen of a target application, every operation, every button, every link that I press on we are providing an end-to-end response time. So from the moment the user clicks on a link until all of those components provide the result and the user can actually go to the next step, that's the Knoa end-to-end response time. So if you are trying to deliver this new class of SLAs to actually understand the application performance and how it's impacting your user execution, you could only do it with the Knoa-based agent technology. Now, another thing that you'll note is that we go pretty deep. We're actually telling you how many operations, for example, were executed. So how many times and how many users are actually executing that operation. And the reason why that's important is we actually help you with impact analysis. So not only can our solution give you a new metric in terms of SLA, but we could also help you with the root cause analysis. We could enable a much faster resolution because we could eliminate noise, we could eliminate subjectivity, and we could enable you to truly measure who is being impacted. So for example, an operation that is being executed thousands of times with lots of users across your user population, that is something that you want to focus on. That is something that you want to alert on. But things that are just impacting several users, that should be much lower on your radar. So we actually help you with that impact analysis as well. Now, another thing that you'll note, which is really powerful, and this is where analytics come in, is that because it is an end-user-based monitoring technology, the more analytics you incorporate about the end users, the richer the data set and the better the ability to actually get to that impact analysis and remediation faster. So for example, let's assume that I know the locations of all the end users, right? And you could easily get this from your Active Directory. You could just import this right from LDAP. So we can actually help pinpoint and see that it's very clear, for example, here, that in Chicago is where my end users are suffering from a response issue. So instead of spending all my time from all the different component logs and APM logs and server logs and CPU availability and so forth, I could actually zero in on where the end users are truly being impacted. Now you could also zero in on individual users. So it's very clear here that most of my users are actually performing pretty well, but the application for this one user is actually having a response time that well exceeds the defined SLAs. But now if the IT team has this visibility, instead of spending so much time and effort in looking at the server optimization and database optimization, we've actually pinpointed that the problem is with this end user's desktop specifically. So that's the ability to actually, if you start from an end user perspective, you're able to quickly isolate the problems. You have new metrics that actually tell you what the end-to-end response time is and actually enable you to focus your remediation plans and get to that analysis much, much quicker. Now, another thing that I want to demo is, and as JP mentioned, that the advantage of an agent-based technology is that you could go beyond response time, right? We can actually give you a complete picture of the end user experience. Now, one of those components is the ability to actually capture all errors that the end user is experiencing. Now, this includes system errors, but this, more interestingly, because it's an agent-based technology, we could actually capture user errors. So, for example, and again, we apply the same type of technology here. You could capture user errors or system errors across your entire application, enterprise application stack. So whether it's a SaaS delivery, whether it's your ERP systems, we're able to tell you how many errors are occurring, how many users are being impacted. And keep in mind, this is all before the users actually open tickets. So for the first time, not only can your application supporting be proactive and provide new class of SLAs, but your IT service desk could actually also provide better remediation, proactive resolution of issues, and not just be driven by tickets. So for example, here, if I look at my account screen, this is a SIBO application. I'm able to quickly break down by a department, by a site, by any one of these user attributes, where my users are struggling, where are they getting stuck. JP talked about the fact that sometimes there is user interface issues, right? Poor design. We can actually pinpoint that and actually see where that is occurring. So for example, here, if I look at my department, customer service, I see that there are users that are struggling and getting a lot of errors. But not only that, I can actually pinpoint specific end users. So I see that there's one user here, for example, that has more errors than anyone else. Now, the Knoa solution goes much deeper. Not only do we give you the high level of analytics, but we actually also provide the tools and the details that actually allow you to proactively address the issue, actually capture the entire error message. There's no other solution that could do that. Because it's an agent on the desktop, we can actually capture the entire raw error message that the user got, so you're no longer relying on the user's ability to remember what they did, what error message they got, which takes a lot of time. Studies show that most of the tickets that the user opened do not provide enough information to actually work on the remediation. You actually have to go back and forth sometimes 6 to 8 times, which could take up to 2 hours just to understand what the end user did. With a Knoa solution, we're capturing the actual error message proactively, again, before the end user even reported the issue. And not only that, but if I want to get even more details and drill down to the workflow, and the workflow is dynamic. And again, this is only possible with an agent-based technology because we're monitoring all of the user's activity within the target application. From the moment they log in until they log out, I could capture step by step every screen that they hit, every applet, every view, every panel, how long it took them to execute within that screen. And then I can actually navigate and get all the executions that led up to the error and all of the executions that the user did after the error. How did the user react to the error? What did he do? Did he try to reproduce it again? We actually have all this information right in front of us. So this actually takes us to another use case where, there's also SLAs in your service desk in terms of how fast you need to resolve tickets. And there's so many enterprise applications and customers that have, backlog of support incidents where they're not able to meet SLAs in terms of remediation of support issues. So this is another advantage, like JP mentioned, because we have all this information in the workflow, we can actually help you with those SLAs as well, because we capture the entire user experience well beyond just the simple response metrics. So these are the two main areas that we wanted to demonstrate. The ability to actually provide new class of SLAs in terms of response times, but then on top of that, provide the IT service desk with tools that allow you to truly understand the end user experience, so you can actually enable better SLAs across your user support organization as well. We'd gladly schedule deep dive demos with any of the participants in the webinar and showcase these use cases as well as others. And I'm going to pass it back to Mike right now.
Well, thank you, Ilya, for an excellent demo. Thank you, Jean-Pierre, for an excellent presentation. And thank you to our audience for spending time with us today. This entire session will be available on demand. If you registered and attended, we will send you the link, and you'll be able to access it and do that at your leisure. Just so you know, we're also sponsoring another Forrester webinar where Jean-Pierre will present about the challenges and opportunity with application adoption. It's become a top level incentive area for line of business executives and CIOs, and we'll explore that and learn about new technologies and new best practices. That webinar is scheduled for Thursday, June 13th at 1 p.m. ET, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Once again, thank you for your time. Thank you, Jean-Pierre and Ilya, and thank you to our audience. Have a great day, everybody.